What are we discussing on today's podcast, you ask? The state of the D-backs, who hot and who's not after the month of August. Did Zac Gallen lose his Cy Young? And 5 things the D-backs need to do to improve their playoff chances down the stretch. Discussing that and so much more on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, MillardThomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at Thomas24 for my personal account, or just look up Locked on Diamondbacks about Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to the Locked on Diamondbacks YouTube channel. And today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Now let's talk about the state of the D-backs and a little bit of who's hot and who's not after the month of August, because the D-backs had a great Game 1 victory over the Colorado Rockies. The D-backs won Game 1 4-2. They're now 4 games above 500 and are sitting in that wild card spot. And the D-backs, they've been interesting over their last 10 games because they beat this Rockies team, right? They took it to the Padres, but they got swept by the LA Dodgers, then lost 2 out of 3 to the Baltimore Orioles. So they lost 5 out of 6. Another bad stretch for the D-backs in the second half of the season, where they were really bad for a while. Then they got hot, for a little bit against teams like the Padres, and then they got bad again against the Dodgers and Orioles. But against the Colorado Rockies, this is a series for the D-backs to get back on track and really cement themselves in this NL wildcard race. Because even though the D-backs did lose 5 of 6, what's nice about this NL wildcard race is no one is really pulling themselves away from the rest of the pack, at least for that third wild card spot, because as it currently stands, I got the wild card standings right here. The Phillies have the number 1 spot with a 5.5 game lead over the playoff field. Next is the Chicago Cubs, who have a 3-game lead. And then you got the D-backs, who currently own the third wild card spot, but they're 3 games behind the Cubs. And they were tied with the Cincinnati Reds in terms of winning percentage, but there's some weird stuff going on. That's why the D-backs are ahead of the Reds in the standings, despite the Reds owning the tiebreaker. But you look at that third wildcard spot, the D-backs currently own it, but the Reds are tied with their winning percentage. Marlins are a half game back, and then the Giants are 1 game back. So it's still super thick and muddled in the middle of that NL wildcard race. And for the D-backs, this series against the Colorado Rockies is huge for them to get back on track. In Game 2, you're going to have Brandon Pfaadt against Kyle Freeland. And Pfaadt, in the month of August, I wouldn't say I'm going to put him under either hot or not, because I wouldn't say he was phenomenal or terrible in the month of August. But if I had to lean in a certain direction, I would say his arrow, why did I say it like that? His arrow is pointing upwards, because Brandon Pfaadt in the month of August was solid. He was better than decent. He had a 4.01 ERA in the month of August across 33 innings pitched, a 2.28 average allowed, a 1.19 whip. Like, he was solid in the month of August. 34 strikeouts and 33 innings pitched, and only 4 home runs allowed, which is the best part of that. So Brandon Pfaadt's going to be going in Game 2. He's been solid in the month of August. He's been trending upward with the arrow, like I just said. So you'd like to see that. Then in game 3, you're going to have Chris Flexen versus Zach Davies. And in that 5 or 6 stretch, the only win was the Zach Davies start where he pitched a gem. So the D-backs next 2 games are not going to have Merrill Kelly or Zac Gallen because Merrill Kelly pitched a gem in game 1. Unfortunately, he left with cramp injuries, going to have to work on that hydration or potassium situation for Merrill Kelly. But I do feel for him because I was in San Diego this past weekend for Labor Day. I was on the beach Sunday playing spike ball with the homies, and then all of a sudden I was running down a ball, grabbed the back of my leg, and immediately went down to the sand because I caught a Charlie horse and I could not run anymore. And my day was done. So I definitely understand the cramps, Merrill Kelly. But the D-backs will have an opportunity the next 2 games where Fott and Zach Davies on the mound. And then I really want to look at who's hot and who's not after the month of August, because the D-backs are going to need some of these players to get going for the rest of the season, because the D-backs don't have the easiest schedule. This is why this series against the Rockies is so important, because after the Rockies, it gets tough again because you got the Chicago Cubs who, like I just said, 3 games on the D-backs in the wildcard race, crucial series. Then you play the Mets, who not good this season, but still loaded with talent. Then you play the Cubs again after that. So 2 of your next 3 series are against the Cubs. And then after the Cubs, you play the Giants. So 3 of your next 4 series are teams directly in that wild card race. And there's not going to be really any give-me's, in these next 4 series, because even though the Mets are bad, they still got loaded payroll with a ton of talent. So I don't want to sleep on the Mets. That's why this series against the Colorado Rockies is so important. I do think it's borderline crucial that the D-backs get the sweep. It's not mandatory because all these teams in the wild card race, I don't think any of them is going to get, go on a 10-game winning streak, but it would be very nice to see the D-backs sweep the Colorado Rockies. And to do that, you're going to need some of these players to keep doing what they're doing and some of these players to pick it up, because when you look at the month of August, some of the best players for the D-backs, Gabriel Moreno, 977 OPS, 327 average in the month of August. Christian Walker, 898 OPS, 302 average in the month of August. And then Lourdes Gurriel, 845 OPS in the month of August. Those are definitely the 3 best D-backs players from an offensive standpoint. But when you look at the players who are cold, Ketel Marte needs to get it going. 179 average, 601 OPS in the month of August. And we need to just stop playing the Nick Ahmeds and the Jace Petersons of the world. Both of them below a 600 OPS. Both of them like a 190 batting average combined. Like, those 2 dudes are not doing anything for the D-backs in this lineup right now. And when we look at the pitching in the month of August, well, they're going to be talking about Zac Gallen a little bit later, but Merrill Kelly, he's got 3.57 ERA in the month of August. Solid. Brandon Pfaadt, 4.01 ERA in the month of August. But the guys who have actually been good, Slade Cecconi, 2.57. Kevin Ginkel, 2.77 ERA in the month of August. Even Bryce Jarvis, 3.75 ERA in the month of August. You can trust those dudes. The dudes you can't trust this past month, McGuff, 5.4 ERA. Miguel Castro, 10.45. Mantiply, 6.97. Seawald's at a 4.66. Cal Nelson's at a 4.7. Even Ryan Nelson, he's at an 18 flat. Like, this D-backs team desperately needs this bullpen to pick it up. As we've been saying, the relievers have been so bad post All-Star break, and I don't know why. When you look at the D-backs starting rotation in the month of August, they had a 4 ERA flat. So the rotation in the month of August was very good for the D-backs this past month. There was a lot of starts where the D-backs went 6 or 7 strong innings. Maybe Merrill Kelly left early with the cramps. But then you look at the flip side, the bullpen, they improved, because in July their ERA was 6.04, but in the month of August, 5.61. So you can say at least it improved. At least it took a step in the right direction. But still, that is absolutely terrible. So bullpen desperately needs to pick it up just a little bit, as we've discussed before. Cal Nelson, Kevin Ginkel, Paul Sewald feels like the perfect 1-2-3 combo in the back end of the bullpen to close it up. So the D-backs desperately need some of these relievers to step up. And offensively as a team, like I mentioned, Gurriel, Walker, and who's the other guy? Moreno have all been good this month. But as a team, the D-backs offense was not very good in the month of August. They were 10th in OPS as a team. You look at average, they were 9th in average, and this is in the National League in the month of August. And then runs scored, they scored the 12th most runs in the month of August. Teams like the Colorado Rockies and the Washington Nationals scored more runs than the D-backs in the month of August. And from a pitching perspective, team ERA in the month of August for the National League was 11th, 464. So the D-backs on both sides of the ball. Offense needs to pick it up. You had a few dudes who were really hot in the month of August, but guys like Ketel Marte have to get going. We have to see less of the Jace Petersons of the world. Then from a pitching perspective, the rotation has been really good, but definitely need the bullpen to step it up a little bit more, because right now, when we look at the wild card race, the D-backs are in the middle of it. They own that third wild card spot, and with no one really running away with it, this is the D-backs opportunity starting against the Colorado Rockies to hopefully go on a run this final month. And coming up, I'm going to be talking about 5 things the D-backs need to do to improve their playoff chances down the stretch. But before we get there, I first want to talk to you guys about Nutrafol, because let me get my ad overlay for the YouTube audience. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their health wellness quiz, identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. And it works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol's men's hair growth supplements. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommended Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Now let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast and discuss 5 things the D-backs need to do to improve their playoff chances. And these are just things that I came up with randomly on my own. I tried to do stuff that was a little bit more under the radar and maybe a little less obvious. Some of these things are going to be pretty obvious, but still things that the D-backs need to do down the stretch. And the first thing that I want to talk about, which is super obvious, but sometimes Torey Lovullo forgets this as we see it in his lineups, but just play your best players. It's not even like hard analysis. It's not incredible insight. It's something every manager and GM should do. Just play your best players. You ever play fantasy football, basketball, baseball? It don't really matter what the sport is, but you got a guy like you look at the Cowboys the last couple of years. You got Tony Pollard on your team, but every time you watch the Cowboys offense, you're watching Zeke Elliott in 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and then Tony Pollard comes in for his 30% of touches a game, and it feels like every time he touches the ball, he's the best running back in the league. Sometimes fantasy players know who the best players are, and GMs and coaches do not. And it's crazy, but sometimes you have to remind your managers, play your best players. And this is what Torey Lovullo forgets sometimes, because Nick Ahmed, I love the guy, right? He's one of the longest tenured players in D-backs franchise history. He's at the top of the leaderboard for games played and a whole bunch of random D-back stats. But guess what? Nick Ahmed is not going to be a memorable baseball player in the lore of the sport. He's not even going to be in the Hall of Fame, and he shouldn't be in the D-backs Hall of Fame. Nick Ahmed has always been a replacement level player. If you think he's better than that, it's just because of his defensive upside and the fact that he's in his mid-30s. Defense still very good, but he offers absolutely no value of offense. There's a lot of players that I could find that could give me what Nick Ahmed does, like a Andrelton Simmons, a Jose Iglesias. If you just need someone with a fat glove, a super clean defensive wizard that can't do anything for you at the plate, you can find those guys on the open market. Nick Ahmed cannot do anything for you in your lineup. He needs to be put on the bench and not see the lineup the rest of the season. But Torey Lovullo is never going to do that, because Nick Ahmed is just too much of a veteran and a clubhouse guy. Also, Can we see the best players stacked at the top of the lineup? I don't want to see a Jace Peterson batting 6. I don't mind when we put Perdomo 9 because he does seem to be better when he's 9, but let's get more Moreno at the top of the lineup, right? I don't mind when we put Alec Thomas 5th when he's playing really well. Let's get the guys like Longoria with some pop near the top of the lineup. Like, I want the best players to be at the top. I need the Nick Ahmed, the Manny Riveras, no Pavin Smiths, 6th or 7th in your lineup. Like, all those kind of guys need to be at the bottom. It needs to be the Morenos, the Gurriels, the Longorias. Like, those are the guys that should be 5, 6, 7 in your lineup, not the other dudes who I just mentioned. And also, just overall, more Moreno. I know he's a catcher. You can't play him every day. Jose Herrera's guy come in sometimes, but let's make that as few as possible down the stretch. Final 30 or whatever games left in the season. Going to need Moreno to step up and be huge, because in the month of August, like I laid out in the first segment, Moreno was the best D-backs offensive player in the month of August. With the way he could do also defensively, throwing out guys, need more Moreno in the lineup. Number 2, Paul Sewald needs to close down that 9th inning. We saw in this game against the Colorado Rockies, he gave up an earned run in the 9th. We've seen him go on stretches with the D-backs where he's been absolutely shut down, where he it feels like he can nail down 7 straight saves for the D-backs in the back end of the bullpen. I think so far for Arizona, he has been good, but the ERA tells you 4.22. He has had a couple blown saves. He has had a couple opportunities where he does give up runs in the 9th inning. And considering what the alternative has been the last, few seasons, it has been awful. I love what I've seen from Paul Sewald compared to what I used to see from the other relievers in the past, but Sewald needs to be a little bit cleaner, needs to be a little bit better. I'm going to put a lot of pressure on his shoulders, a big workload for Sewald, because the closer role has been so bad and the expectations are going to be super high for Sewald to get the job done, but we kind of need him to do. If the D-backs enter any games in this final month with a 1-run lead, a 2-run lead, a 3-run lead, Paul Sewald is getting the save opportunity. I'm going to need him to shut down. I can't see another blown save for the rest of the season. I think Paul Sewald, with the kind of passion and spirit he pitches with, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think he's a big game kind of pitcher. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a scoreless streak from Paul Sewald in the final month of the season. How about this, Will? How about this one? Can someone on the left side of the infield please step up for the D-backs? I just mentioned how bad Nick Ahmed is. I don't think he's going to be the guy, but the D-backs do have someone on the left side of the infield who we did see make it to the All-Star team this season, who has been crucial at times to the run-scoring part of this D-back squad throughout various parts of the season. That is Geraldo Perdomo, who's still on the season. 366 OBP, 758 OPS, 267 average. Like, the numbers still aren't bad for Perdomo. 109 OPS plus, a 2.7 WAR. Like, Perdomo is still a very solid player. Over his last 8 games, started 12 games total, 292 average. You'll take that. Perdomo in the first half of the season, when he did make the All-Star team, 271 average, 787 OPS. He's dropped off a little bit in the second half, but not a big time. I think really where Perdomo's probably fallen off in the second half of the season is coming through with runners in scoring position, because in the first half, he was just so clutch in that area, and still on the season, 346 average, 1044 OPS with runners in scoring position on the season. So if we could get Perdomo, for some reason, when he bats 9th, he just seems to be better than when he bats in any other position. The numbers don't exactly bear that out, because they also love him batting 8th. But on the season, when he's batting 9th, 239 average, 762 OPS, which is just fine. But considering what Perdomo could do with the runners in scoring position, I don't mind him batting 9th. If he can pick it up down the stretch, at least get opportunities with runners in scoring position in that number 9 hole, and then you're able to set up the rest of the lineup. I like Perdomo a lot. You also got a guy like Evan Longoria, playoff veteran. I've seen him as a Red Sox fan rip the heart out from me before when he hit that home run the final game of the season to send the Rays to the playoffs. I think he's probably a big game player as well. End of the season, I think he'll be great in these high pressurized moments. Would love to see a little bit more Longoria, or even Emmanuel Rivera. I mean, he has stretches where he can get very hot. He was very hot for the first couple months of this D-back season. Obviously, it doesn't offer a ton of power, but at least a guy that could be just a pure hitter and just get some base hits. I wouldn't mind that as well. Or you go into the minor league tank, and maybe you could find someone, because talking with Lindsey Crosby of Locked On MLB Prospects last week, he said Ivan Melendez and Devison Dolis Santos, two guys in Double-A that could come up and play third base right now for the D-backs and provide some pop. So I need someone to pop on that left side of the infield coming down the stretch for the D-backs if they really want to make a playoff push. Now, I got a couple more things that I want the D-backs to do down the stretch of the season. I want to discuss if Zac Gallen lost his Cy Young Award. But before we get there, I first need to talk to you guys about this little app that I used this past weekend, because football season is upon us. That means fantasy football season is here, and one of the best apps and platforms to use is the Sleeper app, because the MLB playoffs are around the corner, which means the clock is ticking on your chance for 100 times cash payout on your daily fantasy baseball picks. Baseball has never been more exciting than it is now, with studs like Acuna, Betts, and Ohtani. Pick more or less stats for these stars based on what you want to do, like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and more. You could get up to 100 times payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right. You can win big. I use Sleeper not for the daily picks, but for the fantasy purposes, because I just drafted my Dynasty Football League on there just this past weekend, and I think I'm really set up. Cooper Kupp is already hurt, but I still got Tyreek Hill. I got Deontay Johnson. I got Debo, Chris Godwin. I also have Jonathan Taylor on that team as well. But it's a dynasty league, and there's not a better fantasy football platform for dynasty than Sleeper. So use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And please, please, please download the Sleeper app and play a little fantasy football and make some picks to win some money. All right. Let's get back into this Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. I'm recording this late Labor Day. I'm starting to fade a little bit here. I feel like my speech is starting to go. So let's wrap up this final segment strong. Let's talk about my last couple of things I want the D-backs to do down the final stretch of the season to make the playoff push. Next thing is Brandon Pfaadt needs to show us why he's the next second coming, I want to say, because Brandon Pfaadt, of course, highly touted prospect, had one of the highest strikeout totals we've ever seen from a minor leaguer in like a decade. And like I said, in the month of August, 4.01 ERA, Brandon Pfaadt has been pitching better down the stretch. And I want to see Brandon Pfaadt not just continue to pitch better, but I want to see Brandon Pfaadt pitch like he's been in the league for a decade. I want Brandon Pfaadt, after struggling so much, to start those first 8 starts of the season, right? Because Brandon Pfaadt, to start his professional career, was giving up a lot of home runs and not exactly pitching too deep into these ball games as well. Because you look at his first few starts, 7 earned runs, 6 earned runs, 1 earned run, then 3, then 5, then 6. And during that time, home runs. But if you look at Brandon Pfaadt recently in the month of August, this is what he did. 7 innings, 1 earned run, then 4.24 earned runs, 5.23 earned runs, 7-0, 5.1 2 earned runs, and then 4 innings, 5 earned runs. So a couple of elite starts, a couple stinkers, and then like a meh start in there. So for Brandon Pfaadt, we've seen him in the month of August be, twirl a gem. And then we've also seen the lows where it's like, okay, maybe this guy is still working through those rookie growing pains. I want to see more of those pitching into the 6th, pitching into the 7th type starts from Brandon Pfaadt. I want him to show us why he was considered a highly touted prospect. I think he has the talent. And considering these are big games, these are high pressurized games, these are the games that tell you the makeup of these players and the kind of character these players have, because these are borderline playoff level atmosphere games, and every game is so crucial. Every loss feels like the end of the world. Every win feels like you're going to lock in a playoff berth. So for the Brandon Pfaadts of the world, for all these young guys, really, we want them to step up. Maybe I should just make this a whole young guy segment, because I think we're really going to see down this final month of the season which of these players are the guys that can step up in these big moments and which are the guys that kind of shrink in these big moments. And maybe it's not even the young guys that we should look at, because a guy like Zac Gallen, who's been in the league for a few years, we haven't seen him in the playoffs, right? So we want to know what his playoff makeup is, a Ketel Marte. So really for this whole roster, we're going to see who's going to step up and who's going to shrink in this final month of the season. But really, Brandon Pfaadt is going to be the guy that I'm looking at most during these final couple weeks. And then the final point that I want to make, that I want to see the D-backs do is, can someone from the minors please bring some magic to the MLB level? I think the D-backs need another catalyst, another spark plug that could just ignite this whole team down the stretch. You know, like what Ellie De La Cruz was for the Cincinnati Reds, or Corbin Carroll was last season for the D-backs, or at the beginning of this season, this year for the D-backs. I want to see the D-backs just drop someone in that could be a catalyst, right? We've seen Ryan Nelson, Dre Jameson at the end of last season do it. We've seen Corbin Carroll at the end of last season do it. I mean, Slade Ciccone in the middle of this season kind of did it. Like sometimes the D-backs, or Jake McCarthy at the end of last season, like who's going to be the D-backs minor leaguer that they call up that could just get hot down the stretch and really play a crucial part? It could even be someone that we've seen, like a Jake McCarthy, who had just been putting on a show every day in Reno. Maybe it's someone like Jordan Lawler. Maybe it's the guys like I mentioned before, the Melendezes and the De Los Santos of the world. I just want to see the D-backs make a call up down the stretch of a minor leaguer that can hopefully bring some magic to the major league level. And then that wraps up the 5 things I want to discuss on whether that wraps up the 5 things I want to discuss on what the D-backs should do down the stretch to improve their playoff chances. But one thing that I did write down and then wiped away was Zac Gallen needs to play like Merrill Kelly this season, or needs to pitch like Zac Gallen last year, because I want to ask the question, did Zac Gallen lose the Cy Young with how he's pitched in his last 2 outings? Because Zac Gallen recently has not looked good, right? If you look at Zac Gallen's last 2 starts, 5.1 innings pitched, 5 earned runs, 5.1 innings pitched, 6 earned runs, so 11 earned runs over the last 2 starts. And if you look at FanDuel right now, they have him 4th in Cy Young voting. So it's a real question. Did Zac Gallen lose the Cy Young award with his last 2 starts? And I think as it currently stands, he is no longer the favorite. He is no longer even, according to FanDuel, top 3, but I don't think his stake in the race is done. According to FanDuel, he's like plus 3,000 now, but I don't think his stake in the race is done. He's no longer the front runner when we look at the stats, because a few starts ago, even just 2 starts ago, right? You looked at the stats, Zac Gallen was pretty much top 3 to 5 in every major statistical category, but now it's really just strikeouts and innings pitched. And I think that's still the best path for Zac Gallen to win the Cy Young Award, is that workload. Way more innings than anyone else, than the Striders or the Snells or the Steels. Strikeouts, Strider's going to lead it, but he can still be 2nd or 3rd if you're Zac Gallen. The command is still going to be there, still going to have a decent amount of wins, but I think you're borderline going to have to be perfect down the stretch if you're Zac Gallen, because Blake Snell is going to have the ERA title and be 2nd in wins. Justin Steele is going to be like 2nd in ERA and lead the league in wins. And then Spencer Strider is going to be like Spencer Strider is going to lead strikeouts by far and might finish with a better ERA than Zac Gallen. So Gallen definitely needs to get on his high horse. If this was last year's Zac Gallen, I don't think it's even a contest. I think Zac Gallen probably runs away with this Cy Young Award. That's why it's so disappointing this season, because no one has exactly run away with it. There's no Sandy Alcantara this year. Zac Gallen has been the front runner for most of the season, and now all of a sudden he's fumbling down the stretch. He's fumbling the Cy Young Award trophy. I'm very sad and upset about it, but I will take the consolation prize of D-backs making the postseason and Zac Gallen putting on a show in the playoffs. That's the only consolation prize I will accept, because if Zac Gallen sucks down the stretch and the D-backs miss the playoffs, guess what? I will not be a very happy camper. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news, coverage, and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Don't forget to catch every D-backs pitch on their hometown broadcast when you download the Sirius XM app and search up Diamondbacks. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.